The night the deal was struck, the moon hung low over the Mississippi Delta, so quiet, so deceptively calm, that no one could have guessed two women's futures were being traded like broken tools. And as the ink dried on the order that would alter their lives forever, one man stood in the doorway of the slave quarters, listening to the distant laughter from the big house, wondering why the air suddenly tasted like iron. He didn't yet know that his fate, and the fate of two young twins, was being stitched together in the dark, without his name ever spoken. Elias had always measured time by the rhythm of the plantation, the heavy groan of the cotton press, the distant grunt of mules, the whistle of overseers who treated breath as something they owned. But that summer of 1859, something unsettling crept into the routines he'd grown forced to endure. The master had been restless for weeks, pacing the veranda long after sunset, chain-smoking cigars until the night air stank of burning resentment. Whispers spread like fever through the slave quarters. Another failed attempt, another disappointment, another reminder that the master's bloodline hung by a thread. And in those whispered fragments, Elias heard a truth no one dared say aloud. The master blamed his own slaves for everything he could not build, including a legacy. Elias was not a troublemaker. In 27 years he had learned the art of invisibility, eyes lowered, steps measured, voice soft. But he carried a quiet strength in his chest, the kind that comes from surviving what tries to break a man. And perhaps it was that strength the master resented most, because while Elias had no power over his own life, the master believed he had the right to reshape it at will. The twins appeared one morning like shadows dragged into the sun. Their names were Anna and Mara, 19 years old, identical except for the faint scar above Mara's left eyebrow. Elias noticed them because the overseer barked at everyone to step aside, as the girls were marched toward the big house. They walked with their hands clasped tightly, knuckles white, as if letting go would cause something inside them to shatter. Nobody knew where they came from. Nobody dared ask. But word spread within hours. The master wanted heirs, and the mistress, quiet and withdrawn, had not conceived in years. And so the master had sought what he believed to be the next solution. 2 fresh bodies, as he crudely called them. Elias felt sickness twist inside him when he overheard the kitchen staff repeating the master's conversation with a visiting doctor. With proper pairing, the doctor had said matter-of-factly, as though discussing livestock, "You'll get results within a year." The master had laughed, and declared he had just the men in mind. The men. Elias understood then why the overseer had been taking strange notes: strength, age, bone structure. They were assessing them like breeding stock. For the first time in years, Elias couldn't steady his breathing. His mind returned to the memory of his mother, who used to whisper, "Your body belongs to God, not to them," while brushing his hair with trembling fingers. But she had been wrong. On the plantation, nothing belonged to God. That night, Elias lay awake on his pallet, feeling the heat press against his skin. The air smelled of sweat, soil, and fear he tried to bury deep but could not smother. The conversation swirling around him confirmed the worst. The master intended to assign Anna and Mara to two of the strongest men on the plantation to ensure pregnancy. Elias prayed, something he'd not done in months, that he wouldn't be chosen. But fate is cruel to men who ask gently for mercy. 2 days later, he was called to the veranda, where the master sat with a glass of bourbon in one hand, documents in the other. "You're healthy," the master said, not looking up. "Strong. Proven hard-working. I've invested too much in you to let your seed go to waste." Elias didn't respond. He wasn't supposed to. "You'll be paired with one of the twins," the master continued, "and Samuel with the other. You'll both report to the guest house tonight. Do your duty. I'll hear no excuses. Do your duty." Elias felt something inside him crumble. He had known Samuel since boyhood, another man worn down by years of forced labor, another soul taught obedience through survival. When Samuel heard the news, he didn't speak. He only sat down on a tree stump and stared ahead, fingers trembling. "They're just girls," he whispered. "We ain't supposed to take nothing from nobody." Elias nodded, but there was no nod strong enough to change the world those men lived in. That evening, the twins were seated in the guest house on opposite sides of the room, their faces pale, their shoulders shaking. They did not look at each other. They did not look at Elias or Samuel. They looked at the floor, as though staring anywhere else might break whatever fragile dignity they were holding onto. Elias approached slowly, stopping several feet away. "I won't touch you," he said quietly, voice thick with shame. "I won't do anything to you." Anna looked up first. Her eyes were red but steady. "If you don't," she whispered, "they'll hurt us. And they'll hurt you." Mara nodded, unable to speak. The room felt smaller, hotter, more suffocating. Elias felt rage, cold, heavy, poison-like, rise in his chest. Rage at the master, at the system, at the world that had twisted something sacred into something monstrous. Hours passed with them all sitting in silence, for lives trapped in the same cruel moment. Elias knew they couldn't stay like that forever. He knew choices made on plantations were never truly choices. But he also knew he would not become what the master wanted him to be. And so, with trembling hands, he made a decision that would change all their lives, a decision that involved a lie, a risk, and a betrayal the master would never see coming. He leaned closer to Anna and Mara and whispered something so dangerous it made both of them gasp. And before he could explain further, heavy footsteps echoed outside the door. The overseer was coming back. Elias closed his eyes, heart pounding. What he had just promised the twins might save them, or damn them all. The door handle rattled once, but didn't open, as if the overseer only wanted to remind them that he could return at any moment. When his footsteps faded into the humid Mississippi night, Elias finally exhaled, slow, shaky, the kind of breath a man takes when standing at the edge of a cliff with only one path forward. Anna moved first. She leaned toward him, voice barely audible. "What did you mean? You can walk out of here without being touched?" Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap, the way a child knots grass to keep from trembling. Elias looked at Samuel, then back at the twins. "You won't be hurt tonight," he murmured. "Not by us. We'll fool them." Mara, who'd been silent since they arrived, shook her head. "Fool them? They count everything. They watch everything. They'll know." He hesitated. "Not if we give them what they want on paper. Not in truth." Anna studied him with a depth far older than 19. "And you think lies can protect us?" "No," Elias whispered. "But it might buy us time. And time is the only thing we got left to take." The guest house creaked under the weight of settling heat. A lantern flickered beside the door, casting thin, trembling shadows that made the walls look like they were breathing. Elias felt Samuel's eyes on him, worn, tired, but trusting in a quiet, brotherly way they had never said aloud. Samuel had always followed his instincts, whether they led him to risk or mercy. Elias stood and crossed the room. "Y'all stay sitting. Don't move unless someone comes in." He dipped his fingers into a small basin of water near the washstand and splashed it onto the sheets. Then he pressed his own wrist against the rough wood of the table until small beads of blood appeared, just enough to smear. Samuel watched, swallowing hard. "You better hope he believes it," Samuel muttered. "He'll see what he wants to see," Elias said. "He always does." Anna covered her mouth with both hands. Mara's eyes widened. They weren't naive. They had heard the same stories, the same rumors of other plantations, other women, other nights when screams were muffled by cotton bales. But watching Elias deliberately stage something unthinkable, without ever touching them, felt like witnessing a rebellion whispered through trembling breaths. Elias wiped the blood on the crumpled sheet and sat back down, rubbing his aching wrist. Samuel followed suit, dragging his hand across the mattress as if helping sculpt a scene neither man ever wished to imagine. When they were done, the bed looked disturbed enough to satisfy any overseer who peeked inside. The rest, Elias hoped, would be filled in by the overseer's assumptions rather than truth. But it wasn't only the physical evidence that frightened him. It was the knowledge that if the master demanded more than appearances, if he demanded certainty, there would be no way to protect Anna or Mara again. He sat on the floor beside them, knees drawn up, trying to slow his heartbeat. The twins remained close together, their shoulders touching. Mara's breathing was uneven, as though she was fighting against the walls closing in around them. "They'll want children," Mara said suddenly, voice raw. "And when none come, they'll blame us," Samuel finished grimly. Elias shook his head. "We don't think that far yet. Tonight we protect what we can." The room held its breath with them. After some time, Anna tilted her head toward Elias. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know us." Elias didn't answer at first. He just stared at the floorboards, remembering the women he had known, his mother, who was punished because she refused to let an overseer touch her, his older sister, sold to a plantation in Louisiana when the master saw she was pretty enough to fetch a higher price. "I've seen enough taken," he finally said. "I won't add to it." Anna's eyes softened. Mara blinked back tears she'd been hiding behind her silence. Outside, the crickets screamed their nightly protest, drowning out the distant hum of riverboats drifting somewhere along the Mississippi. Elias wondered how far a man could run if he ever made it to that water. How long before dogs caught the scent? How long before gunshots replaced hope? A heavy thud echoed on the porch, jerking them all upright. "Don't speak," Elias whispered. The door swung open, lantern light flooding the room. The overseer entered, eyes sweeping the space with a predator's calm curiosity. He glanced at the rumpled sheets, the dampness, the smears. His lips curled into something like satisfaction, cruel, shallow, the look of a man who claimed credit for the world's darkest moments. "You did as told," he said. Not a question. A command disguised as praise. Elias lowered his eyes. Samuel did the same. The overseer stepped farther inside. Anna's shoulders stiffened. Mara shrank against her sister. For a moment, Elias worried he would inspect them, touch them, claim authority the master had not even mentioned. But after a few tense seconds, the overseer snorted and stepped back. "The master'll be pleased. You report again tomorrow night." Tomorrow. Elias' chest tightened, but he kept his expression carved in stone. The overseer left, slamming the door behind him. A silence thick as tar settled over the room. No one moved until the crunch of the overseer's boots faded across the yard. Samuel groaned softly. "We can't do this every night. They'll keep pushing. Keep checking." "What then?" Elias leaned back against the wall. "Then we run," he said, surprising even himself. "But not tonight." Anna stared at him in disbelief. Mara's lips parted. "You'd run with us?" Anna whispered. "Knowing what they'd do if they catch you." Elias met her gaze. "I'd rather die trying to save something good than live being owned." The words hung between them, heavy, dangerous, holy. For the first time, Mara's voice broke through the quiet. "You don't even know who we are." "Maybe not," Elias replied. "But I know what you don't deserve." The lantern flickered again, casting the four of them into a trembling circle of light. 4 lives bound by one night, one lie, one impossible hope. Outside, the wind carried the distant sound of dogs barking, faint, but close enough to remind them of what waited beyond any attempt at freedom. Elias closed his eyes, imagining a road out of Mississippi, imagining Anna and Mara walking under a sky that didn't demand their suffering, imagining Samuel laughing somewhere no overseer could hear. But imagining wasn't enough. Not anymore. Before dawn, Elias would have to make a decision that would either save them, or bury them deeper in the master's world than they had ever been. And the sun was already beginning to rise. The first pale streaks of sunlight carved the edges of the guest house, cutting through the shadows like knives. Elias sat quietly, listening to the world waking in the delta, the lowing of cattle, the rhythmic clap of a distant cotton press, the occasional shout of an overseer. Each sound was a reminder that outside these walls, nothing had changed. Outside, they were still property. Outside, every heartbeat could be counted, measured, owned. Anna and Mara stirred beside him, faces drawn with fatigue and fear, yet holding on to the fragile thread of trust Elias had offered them the night before. Samuel, ever vigilant, peered through a narrow crack in the wooden shutter. His fingers drummed a restless rhythm against the sill, a silent counterpoint to the thudding of his own pulse. They knew the master would soon discover the deception, that the blood on the sheets, the staged disturbance, it could never hide the truth for long. Elias rose and paced the small room, mind racing. "We leave at nightfall," he said finally, voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Before the moon rises high we go. The river, the woods, anything that will keep us from being found. We can't wait. They'll come for us the moment they see what's missing." Anna's lips trembled. "And if they catch us?" she whispered. Mara's grip tightened around her sister's hand. "If they catch us, they'll kill us," Elias admitted. But he didn't flinch, because sometimes fear needed to be faced, stared at directly, named aloud. "But if we stay, they'll kill our spirits first. I won't let that happen." They spent the day preparing in silence, every movement careful, calculated. Elias taught them how to move quietly, how to mask their scent in the humidity and dirt, how to keep their bodies low when footsteps approached. Samuel gathered scraps of old clothing and tied them into bundles, enough for food, enough to carry a lifetime of hope in tiny, desperate parcels. The air was thick with tension, each tick of the clock a drumbeat to their perilous plan. As the sun sank low behind the cypress trees, the shadows lengthened, stretching across the cotton fields like dark fingers. Elias led them out the back door, moving with the precision of a man who had long understood the weight of survival. The twins followed, silent, their trust in him absolute, yet heavy with the burden of fear. Samuel stayed close, scanning every inch of the terrain, ears tuned to the smallest creak of branches, the whisper of wind across tall grass. The river lay ahead, a sliver of silver under the dying light, promising escape yet holding the unknown in its currents. Elias paused, turning to look at the twins. "Once we cross this water, nothing will be the same. We'll be free, but it won't be easy. You have to be ready," he said. Their nods were solemn, resolute. They understood freedom was a storm they could not yet see the end of. Then a sudden sound shattered the fragile calm, a gunshot ringing across the fields, sharp, violent, cutting through the evening air. Horses galloped. Dogs barked. A shout that was part command, part rage split the world in two. The overseer had discovered the deception, or worse, suspected it. Panic rippled through their group, but Elias forced them forward, toward the river, toward any chance of survival. They ran through the fields, branches whipping against their skin, roots snaring their feet. Anna stumbled, but Elias caught her, holding her close as if his own strength could shield her from the cruelty that had governed their lives. Mara's scream pierced the chaos as a dog leapt from the shadows, teeth snapping. Samuel pushed it back with a thick branch, but they knew more would follow. At the riverbank, they hesitated. The water looked darker than night itself, swollen from recent rains, the current fast and unforgiving. Elias assessed the river, then glanced at the twins. "We jump together," he said. "We don't stop. We don't look back." Anna shivered violently, and Mara's eyes were wide with terror. Samuel gritted his teeth. "You lead," he told Elias. Elias nodded. They leapt into the water, bodies plunging into the cold, relentless current. The river claimed them immediately, pulling, tossing, threatening to undo all their careful plans. Panic surged, muscles screamed, but Elias held on, dragging the twins with him, Samuel right behind. They fought the pull, the waves battering their limbs, their lungs burning for air. Yet each stroke forward was a stroke toward a future they could almost taste. As they neared the opposite bank, something sharp snagged Elias' foot, a root, a branch, some remnant of the river's cruelty. He fell back with a splash, water flooding his mouth and nose, and a hand shot out to grab him. Samuel's grip was strong, but fleeting. Anna's frantic fingers scraped at him, Mara crying out in terror. For a heartbeat, it seemed the river would claim him, the master would reclaim them, and all hope would vanish into the delta's dark embrace. Then, with one last surge of strength born from desperation and love for life, Elias freed himself. He pulled the twins out of the water, Samuel struggling beside him. They collapsed on the muddy bank, gasping, soaked, bruised, shivering yet alive. For a fleeting moment, the world was silent except for the river's roar and their ragged breaths. Elias looked at them, and for the first time, he allowed himself a flicker of hope. "We're alive," he said. "That's the first step." Anna and Mara clung to each other, trembling. Samuel's hand rested on Elias' shoulder, steadying, grounding. The darkness around them seemed less suffocating now, though it still whispered of pursuit, of danger, of the world that would never forgive the defiance of a few enslaved souls who dared to choose their own fate. And somewhere in the distance, beneath the shadowed cypress, eyes watched, calculating. The master would not forgive. The overseer would not rest. Their escape, though a victory, had only begun the next chapter of a struggle that would test the limits of courage, loyalty, and the human spirit itself. The river ran on, relentless, carrying with it the promise of freedom, and the weight of all that had been left behind. Elias closed his eyes, knowing the night ahead would demand more than strength. It would demand sacrifice. And in the darkness, he whispered a vow to himself, to Anna, to Mara, to Samuel: "We will survive. Whatever it takes." The wind carried the faint sound of pursuit, and the delta seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. If they survived this night, they would never be the same. And if they didn't, no one would remember their names. But they had no choice but to move forward.